Gyre is the best weapon buffing frame in the game. I know, Siren is just staring at me menacingly in the corner. I'm aware with her quadratic, insane scaling potentials and more, and other frames as well. But seriously, Gyre is the best. Let me show you what's going on here. Have a look at this clip. Do you see what's all going on here? Everything that's happening? No? Well, let's just dissect what the hell is going on here in this video, because after this video, I can guarantee you that your opinion on Gyre as a gun buffing frame may change a little. In my previous video, we focused more on how her abilities work, her augments, and the nuking side of Gyre, and I briefly touched on the damage buffing side. However, from deep diving further into this video, I have realized there is just way more than I thought. This video is not going to be focused on how all of her abilities work, but more just an overview and how it all comes together for the gun buffing side of things. So if you'd like to fully learn Gyre's abilities and understand how she works, then go and check out the first video. Why is Gyre so good for gun buffing and just damage buffing in general? Her entire kit is designed around electricity. Cathode Grace, her third ability, increases your critical chance of your weapons as well as your abilities. Her fourth ability, Rotor Swell, will create an electrical field that will shock nearby enemies. When Gyre hits a critical hit via her abilities and her weapons, this is very important here, Rotor Swell will release a discharge and shock enemies. So every time you crit, electricity damage will be dealt to enemies with her fourth ability, Rotor Swell. As we know, with Gyre's passive, for every electrical status effect, your abilities will have 10% increased crit chance, capping at 300%, giving you red crits for your abilities. This will help us proc her discharges more from our abilities, and our weapons are helping to proc discharges more. So we haven't seen anything crazy in terms of the gun buffing. That's fine. That's just her kit as a whole now. Now let's get into the gun buffing side of things. This is where it starts to get a little interesting with her. Gyre's first ability throws down an arc sphere that will deal electricity damage to enemies in the dome when it explodes. I do want to add a pro tip here as a quality of life feature. Sometimes spamming the arc sphere ability gets a bit weird since the ability has two modes mechanically. Your first tap allows you to throw the sphere out. If you tap it again while it's in mid-air or it hasn't touched a surface, it will detonate where it is and create the dome. Sometimes hardcore quick spamming this gets kind of weird and clunky since you're trying to detonate the second time by tapping it again. All you do to combat this is just tap slower and closer to you so that the sphere will detonate by itself, allowing you to cast the three spheres more rapidly and reliably. The augment for Arc Sphere is called Conductive Sphere. This augment alone is what makes her so special with gun buffing before we add other subsumes and other synergies. When you read its description, it doesn't really seem that crazy. Projectiles and projectiles from melees too have a guaranteed electricity status effect with 75% increased electricity damage. Just like most things in Warframe, this is not what this augment does. What the augment actually does is grants a base 75% increased electricity damage bonus and a 75% increased electricity status damage bonus, affected by ability strength. The status damage bonus from this augment is much like the status damage modifier from Elementalist mods. This bonus will stack additively with your Elementalist mods, but this status damage bonus only applies to the electricity damage that you get from the augment and your natural electric procs from your weapon. The electricity damage bonus is an additive damage source, much like your other electricity damage sources like Stormbringer. However, what this mod actually does is give your weapon guaranteed electric procs and will create a separate electric instance per damage instance, kind of like how Zarta's Whisper works. Let's say you hit an enemy with 5 shots because you got 5 multi-shots, then you deal 5 electricity procs. Okay, to summarize that, we have electricity status damage, guaranteed instances of electricity 2, and extra bonus electricity damage. It stacks up 3 times. You can have up to 3 arc spheres at a time as per normal, and with the augment, the effect stacks, meaning more electricity status damage and more electricity instances, which means you can get damage like this. Your projectiles will just need to pass through the sphere to gain the bonus of this augment, and you can also stand in the middle of the sphere if you want, just as long as the projectile moves through the sphere at any point. Conductive Sphere is quite frankly a sleeper augment that opens up a world of possibilities with Gyre and gun buffing. Oh, and a little hint for later on in the video, it affects companions too. But we'll get into that later. To summarize, we have crit chance from 3rd, lightning discharges from 4th, Conductive Sphere guaranteeing us electricity procs, increased status chance, increased everything to help proc discharges from our 4th more. But wait, there's more. Subsuming Shock onto our second ability will allow us to equip Shock Trooper. Shock Trooper will provide us with an extra instance of electricity damage scaling that will be an independent buff, meaning it will not combine with mods. It's pretty much the same as how Conductive Sphere works, providing a separate instance. It also allows us to not really have to mod for electricity on our weapons at all. However, the electricity damage bonus will now scale towards the damage over time of our electricity procs. With 199% ability strength, we have 149% status and electricity damage from Conductive Sphere. Times that bonus by 3 since we can stack it by 3. Then we have 199% extra electricity damage with Shock Trooper. This is before we stack Augmented and Growing Power, and before we add in other bonuses from the weapon. Yeah, the sheer amount of damage here is something else. But wait again, there's even more. These shiny little shits over here, Talforged Violet Archon Shards. Violet Archon Shards have the lovely gain primary electricity damage modifiers. The Talforged version gains 45% primary electricity damage, and you gain an additional 15% per Crimson, Azure, or Violet Archon Shard equipped. The electricity bonus will combine with mods. So it's actually the same thing as what Shock Trooper would do, except it actually just mods the electricity onto our weapons. However, if you have a secondary element that has electricity in it, like corrosive or radiation, it will simply just combine with that element. So just keep this in mind for some weapons that have innate electricity secondary elements or electricity within itself. Now, there is a couple things with the shard that makes it a bit insane. With the 15% extra bonus on top of the 45% bonus per stacking the relevant shards, as you begin to stack them, the bonus will apply on itself in the calculation, meaning at 5 total Talforged Violet Archon Shards, you gain 600% additional electricity damage scaling. That's quite a bit. Yeah, I agree with you. That's just from the Archon Shards. Remember, we have Conductive Sphere and Shock Trooper. Unfortunately, I do not utilize the full 5 shards. I actually only use 3. 3 is more than enough in my opinion, and I use Gyre for other things, but if you wanted to go all in on the gun buffing, then you can do that as an option and gain 600%. With 3 shards, you gain about 270% increased additional electricity damage. Okay, so new summary. I want to do this in steps just so that you don't get lost. Crit chance, lightning discharges, Conductive Sphere, Shock Trooper, and Violet Archon Shards that stack and give us more electricity. This is why Gyre is one of the best weapons platforms in the game. These 5 things come together to make any primary weapon do a metric ton of damage. Now, I know what you're thinking, so much setup. Well, yeah, I do agree with you on that. There is a little bit of setup with Gyre, I'll be honest, but you can do away with the shards, and Conductive Sphere plus Shock Trooper would be more than enough. Even one Violet Shard will actually just do the trick if you wanted to utilize the buff. You can do a budget version of all the stuff that I'm about to show you. There are going to be a lot of builds in this video, so anything that I show you will be end game stuff, so if you want to make it more budget, then by all means go for it. Don't be deterred by the fact that there is so much setup with this. Now let's move on to the gun buffing builds. I have 2 main gun buffing builds that I would like to showcase. Both are pretty much the exact same with different subsumes. The first one is of course our lovely Shock Trooper build. Subsumes over our second and use both augment. You can go brief respite if you find your survivability is lacking, but you shouldn't, considering you're shocking every enemy and you're just deleting them from existence. And then the raw build, which actually is arguably a tad stronger. This is because the Violet Archon Shards will provide electricity on our weapons, the raw buff will increase electricity damage bonuses from the shards, Conductive Sphere, and double dip on the damage over time from the electric procs. The other thing that makes the raw build so strong is the fact that you're now able to run cathode current, which allows your 4th ability to apply more discharges at more damage. One thing I want to add in about which build you should go for: use Shock Trooper if you want to go all in on the electricity damage scaling, and also you don't want to rely on Conductive Sphere and the Archon Shards to give you those electricity procs, and then use Raw if you are fine with using Conductive Sphere and the Archon Shards and you just want to absolutely maximize your damage. I would like to suggest looking at an armor stripping ability with the Conductive Sphere augment, as it's another means to increase the gun buffing damage and so on. My personal favorite would be a Phantomized. The reason for this is because, as we know, electricity damage scales with enemy armor, so the less armor they have, the more damage over time this will do, and also the more raw damage you'll do. So armor stripping is a pretty good idea. Personally, at base deal path, this is not a worry at all. You're doing so much damage, you do not need to care. I will say though, there are a few problems with these builds that I've showcased and I would like to touch on. First, low energy. I don't use flow, but I do use 1 Talforged blue shard for max energy. This is more than enough in my opinion. With 155% ability duration, the arc spheres will last 15.5 seconds, which is not short, but it's not long either. So a great way to combat this will be making use of the Grimoire with the Riz Invocation mod to gain an additional 60% ability duration. This will make a big enough difference for the arc spheres to make them feel a little bit longer and not feel like you're just going to have to keep recasting them. For general armor stripping, I would recommend doing this via corrosive on one of your weapons or companions and so on. Remember, if you are using Shock Trooper, it doesn't matter if you mod for corrosive on your weapons because you'll still gain the separate instance, and Conductive Sphere does the same thing. Partial armor stripping is more than enough for base steel pass, but if you wanted to go full armor stripping, then you can find a means to do that. Let's talk gameplay loop. It's fairly straightforward. Cast your 3 and 4. Your 3 will stay up permanently because you're going to be constantly replenishing that duration. Your 4th, unfortunately, will have to be recasted if you're using Shock Trooper, but if you're using Raw, then you don't have to worry about your 4th at all. Cast Shock Trooper if you're using Shock Trooper to give yourself and your companion the buff. Cast your 1 whenever you want to sit in a specific area or you are up against a tougher target like Thraxes and Demolishers. If you do opt for using the Grimoire, then you can use that at your own discretion, and if it's the raw build, it's the same thing. As you play, you'll begin to figure out how to manage shooting and moving through the domes to proc Conductive Sphere and where to place them. I just throw them down for the most part and then I just shoot through them, because remember, the projectiles just need to pass through, so if the enemy's on the other side, it's not a problem at all. Let's talk weapons. The main focus of Gyre's gun buff and playstyle does somewhat boil down to primary weapons, but it is not limited to that, even if you think that because of the Archon Shards. You can actually use secondaries and melees with the setup too. Although melees are somewhat limited to projectile-based melees like your gun blades and other special ones, unless you're using Rifle Advance. There are a lot of weapons, and I'm going to just quick fire the builds. If you want to make budget versions, please do so. Primary weapons. We're going to start off with primary weapons since it's the main focus, and there is a lot that I'm about to go over. I'm going to go over a few ones that I personally love and feel that they're the best fit, and then I'll just do quick fire suggestions to shorten this video a bit because there is so much to talk about. I will make a quick disclaimer. Any primary will work if you're utilizing the full setup. Seriously. First one is the Coda Base Assist, one of the most satisfying weapons to use with Gyre. The alt fire might benefit from all the buffing, literally melting enemies away and creating chains of blast explosions. It just does millions of damage, especially with all of the buffs and you stacking up Conductive Sphere 3 times. Tenet Glaxion, beam weapon that chains. You cannot go wrong with this, it's super fun to play. Next up is the Proboscis Sonos, one of my favorite weapons to use with Gyre. Proboscis Sonos sends out an arrow that explodes and pulls enemies in. If modded for gas, this thing is absolutely amazing because it has a built-in grouping mechanic that allows you to just melt enemies away, and it has innate viral. Pairing this with electricity with the fact that it chains to nearby enemies, you're doubling up on a group AoE damage of a time effect. Plus, with the sheer amount of scaling, yeah, I mean, I don't even need to sell this to you. I cannot recommend this bow enough. You have to try it with this Gyre setup. It is amazing. Next up is the Kuva Tsar. Again, another sleeper build with Gyre. It's amazing with primary crux. The amount of damage it allows the AoE bomblets to do with the Tsar is something so satisfying to see. It's kind of like the AoE meta all over again. This is the build for the Kuva Tsar that I've used, and the alt fire is absolutely insane for single target damage with all the electricity damage scaling. Kuva Ogress, again, you saw the clip in the beginning. This is insane. There is so much damage. Now how this works is Nightwatch Napalm applies heat fields that apply heat damage over time. Shock Trooper will proc 1 status effect of electricity per shot. However, the Conductive Sphere will add more instances of electricity per tick of Nightwatch Napalm and multi-shot. Here is the damage. It speaks for itself. You could also go primary crux too. The Coda Sporothics volatile variant is a bit expensive, but if you mod it for gas and have the electricity scaling, it is something else. Super satisfying, very fun weapon, but I understand that not everyone wants to spend the money on volatile variant. It is crazy how much damage scaling you get from this. The Cedo Prime, you knew it was going to be on this list. Come on, let's be real. Cedo, alt-fire, multiplicative CO scaling. I don't need to sell this weapon. So many people know about it. Here is the build. The Vidaria Prime, a brand new weapon that is released with Caliban Prime. It was made for Gyre. It really was. It's a bit sad though, because the lightning bolts unfortunately do not inherit the guaranteed lightning procs from Shock Trooper. Okay, quick fire suggestions. Quanta Vandal for single target ridiculous scaling. Torrid Incarnon. Bubonico, Phage with Crux, Godfrey Prime because of the unique trait amplifying electric procs, and of course the Strand Incarnate. Let's talk secondary weapons. This forgoes the need for the primary Archon Shards if you want to focus on secondaries. You will lose out on the Grimoire for increased duration if you're using it as utility. First up is the Furious Incarnate. Furious with the evolution that increases multi-shot when hitting enemies affected by electricity is just Furious lovers, you'll love it. Epitaph. Now we all know the Epitaph, it does some considerable damage with the Hold Fire and even the Tap Fire. But if you pair Gyre with the Conductive Sphere plus Raw or either Shock Trooper, the damage is even crazier and it is absolutely insane how much AoE damage the Epitaph can do. It melts. Compressor Prime, Bubble Gun. Come on. You knew it. Huge amounts of damage instances and multi-shot allowing you to hit hundreds of electricity procs in an instant with this weapon. It's the perfect fit. Now I will mention the Cyotid. Unfortunately, there is a major problem with this gun. It's this bug right here. For some reason, when enemies are affected by the dome, the ult fire of the Cyotid just does not work. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. However, if you learn to move around it by, let's say, maybe making smaller domes with less range or anything like that and moving away from the enemies, gas and electricity scaling with this pistol is insane. Also, I wanted to mention this so that if they ever fix it, it's a perfect combo. The Icarus Prime. Okay, mini rockets, tons of damage that now applies tons of electricity damage. Yeah, you will nuke even more with the Icarus. If you enjoy these pistols, you'll love them even more. Now we move on to melees. There are only a few melees you can use with Gyre technically. I mean, you can use more in the sense that Shock Trooper would allow you to guarantee electricity, so any melee influence weapon will work incredibly well, so keep that in mind, and you have Rifle Advance. First up is the Corofel. It's a gunblade scythe, modding for gas, putting Arc Sphere down with Shock Trooper or Raw, you will absolutely melt everything. It's super fun, definitely worth trying, and any gunblade will be good for that matter, like Stropher or Redeemer. I just don't have proper builds for them. You can also use the Quassus with heavy attacks, but I don't have a proper build for that too. But finally, the best one that I want to talk about is the Siam. The Siam with Gyre is beyond insane. Its unique trait will send out a wave of heat damage on heavy attack. This wave is affected by her Arc Sphere domes and Shock Trooper. Put melee influence on it and you get this. The sheer amount of damage with this is just, I mean, I don't have words. If you're not a fan of melee influence, I completely understand. I am not too. You can use something else. However, I will say though that the Siam has multiplicative scaling with base damage sources like Pressure Point and so on. So that is why my build looks like this at the moment. Yeah, it deletes everything. It's that good. Play around with the synergy, you will not be disappointed. Okay, that covers weapons. Let's talk about companion. Now this is why I say that Gyre is probably the best buffing frame in the game, or damage buffing frame in the game, should I say. You know how Shock Trooper and Conductive Sphere work with your weapons? It does the exact same thing to your companion's weapon. This means any projectile from your companions will gain all of these buffs. The sad thing is the Archon Shards do not affect companion weapons even though they are considered to be primaries, and if you look at them in the arsenal, they will show the electricity there, but it's obviously a UI bug, it doesn't affect them. Either way, it doesn't matter because you have Shock Trooper and Conductive Sphere. But what makes this so special is when you pair Galvanized Chamber and Aptitude on the weapons that I'm about to showcase and use a primary to proc them for your companion, because remember, companions can have galvanized mods, but they cannot stack those effects unless you stack them with the respective mods from your weapon. So your primary needs to have specifically Galvanized Chamber and Galvanized Aptitude, not the shotgun versions or anything else. Let's talk about Sentinels. I have two that I'm going to be showing, but it's not limited to the two, so you can use this on any one that you like and enjoy. Nautilus Prime. It has Cordon to pull enemies in, it has Contagious Bond in there, and since the companion is gaining so much damage from all of the sources, it will constantly be proccing Contagious Bond and Cordon, which amplifies the damage of time effects and pulls enemies in. With this alone, you pretty much don't need to do anything. Plus, Duplex Bond adds to the potency since their projectiles are also affected by Conductive Sphere. That is also another thing that makes this crazy, is that the clones' projectiles are affected. And then the other one is the Doriga. The Doriga has Arc Coil, which spreads status effects to nearby enemies, and you can use this with Duplex Bond too, and you can also equip Contagious Bond if you'd like. You can choose which ones you want. Personally, I like the Doriga because I still like to use my main weapon with the setup. Now, the juicy bits, the companion weapons. First up is the Tazakor. I've mentioned this so many times recently, but do you want electricity procs? Just look at this. Passacore is by far my favorite of all of the companion weapons for any setup. It releases bursts of status electricity that will chain to nearby enemies, stunning them, and more. It has innate electricity with a ton of status chance. And with Duplex Bond, you will have 4 beams chaining to nearby enemies. Mod for either blast, electricity, or viral electricity, and you are looking at this monstrosity. The damage and electricity procs from this weapon and synergy is never not satisfying. It is just by far my favorite and my recommendation. Next up is the Volcax. I did not expect this one to do well, but I actually think that this companion weapon has multiplicative scaling with aptitude because I don't even know. It's just very strong. It is a slow charge rate beam weapon that deals heat, which is not ideal, but if you lower the charge time with fire rate and add a reload speed mod plus Duplex Bond, it's not bad at all. I would recommend the Nautilus with this one. Here is the build here, give it a go for yourself, and it has innate blast. And finally, the Verglas Prime. I mean, Nautilus weapon, I'm sure many people have seen the power of Contagious Bond plus blast and another element with Verglas. It melts when scaled with aptitude mods and others. Here is the build here. I don't need to explain it to you. The clones and the buffing just, yeah. I'm done saying it melts. I'm just glazing Gyre at this point too much. And lastly, I want to talk about the Pharaoh Predacite very quickly. The Anabolic Pollination mod creates a toxin instance just like Shock Trooper does for 15 seconds. So with this, you get Shock Trooper giving electricity and you have toxin. Put on Contagious Bond and the Mecha set and yeah, everything dies. I'm going to cap the video here. This video was supposed to be quick. When I started, I said it's going to be a quick video, but no, Gyre literally has too many synergies and calculation, and just there's so much. I encourage you to take the framework that I covered and test literally anything you want with her. She is absolutely amazing, and the fact that she can provide so many buffs to a full kit is what makes her so crazy. So it's not just any of your weapons that are affected, it's your companions too. The only downside is with normal melees, it's not as crazy as compared to other frames, which is fine. I'm gonna stop there. Thank you so much to our channel members for supporting the channel. Thank you, I appreciate it. You guys are amazing, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.